Hi, everyone. I'm Brooks Gross. I'm a program director at NINDS, National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. I also manage a program in the Brain Initiative, which I'll be talking about, as well as co-lead the Spark Hornet program. Let's see. So I'm going to talk about funding opportunities. This is just to highlight, not for you to actually read it all, but to highlight all the different funding opportunities that we have at NINDS and across NIH that NINDS program officers manage. These range from pharmacologics to biologics to small molecules as well as devices. The one that's outlined in green there is what our team, the Translational Devices team, manages. And so the overall goal for us is to support the development, optimization, and translation of diagnostic and therapeutic devices to treat the nervous system or neuromuscular system. And in that, not only do we aim to meet the mission of NINDS, but also the missions of all the institutes involved with the Brain Initiative, as well as Blueprint MedTech and HEAL, which I'll get into in a second. All our funding opportunities have some phase of development or regulatory approval, and most of them have an early feasibility study or clinical trial. So here are all the different programs that we manage within our team. Within NINDS, we have a couple of earlier stage funding opportunities. One partnered with NIMH for exploratory research. It's an R21, so it's a little higher risk, smaller award. And then there's the Bioengineering Research Grant, which was reissued a couple years ago, and NINDS still signed on to that one. But we only support non-significant risk studies in that. However, the budget is limited to for those. For our team within NINDS, we did away with the two-phase U44 for small businesses, but we are now putting people towards MedTech, which I'll get into in a second. For our former UG3, UH3, it's now the Translational Neural Devices R61, R33. And the difference with this is that budgets are going to be a little smaller than they used to be, and it only allows for non-significant risk studies. So that's this one. It's PAR 24151. The next due date is May 29th. So another big initiative that we have ongoing and actually was just renewed by the Blueprint Neuroscience ICs is the Blueprint MedTech program. This program consists of 2 funded NIH incubator hubs, as well as translator awards that you would apply the normal way through NIH. Within this, like I mentioned earlier, we have a UG3, UH3, as well as a U44. So this is where the small businesses can come in for their 2-phase projects. So late preclinical, regulatory, and then a first-in-human study. The nice thing about all of our funding opportunities, all of our funding, is they're non-dilutive. With MedTech, we have several contracted resources that you have access to. So you just go down the checklist in your application and say, you want to use these resources for these things. You don't have to budget for them or get quotes. NIH will pay for those resources separately. So you only have to include in your budget what are going to be your operational costs. For the hubs, we have at least twice a year pre-proposal submissions, which then a subset are invited for full proposals, and then a subset of that are invited for deep dives where an expert in the industry will help the team and come up with a slide deck. And then we select projects from those for earlier stage development, as well as smaller 6-month seedling projects to give access to expert consultants to get you on the right track if you have less experience with translation. So here's a graphic of some of the services that we provide, both within the incubator hub development projects as well as the more traditional cooperative agreement projects that you would apply directly to NIH. And at the bottom, you can see these are the institutes that participate in MedTech. So your mission, you don't have to fit the mission or indication fit the mission of NINDS, but it can fit the mission of any of these institutes. All right, how much is it? So I'm not going to really go into detail on the Brain Initiative. Again, there are 10 institutes involved. You know, the main goal really is to develop new neurotechnology to enable the discovery and characterization of the human central nervous system. I think we've been doing a pretty good job over the past 10 years, but one thing we've noticed on our team is that we have this series of mechanisms for neurotechnology development and optimization and dissemination, but the projects that tend to get funded are for things that will never go into humans anytime soon. So, you know, 10 to 100,000 channel recording or stimulating with optogenetics or chemogenetics. And so one thing that we decided to do and that I've just launched, and the first due date's also in May, is this proof of concept for novel recording and modulation technologies in the human central nervous system. So separating it out, so these are really the focus is on developing platform technologies for use in humans eventually. Not within the up to 3 years that you're allowed to ask for funding for this RFA, but the goal really is to cover that earlier stage, higher risk, and then however far you can get within that 3 years, great. And then we have other programs that you can go into, whether it's the MedTech incubator hubs for further development or later stage preclinical and regulatory through the MedTech translator, or through our brain initiative, UG3, UH3, and direct to UH3, which have been around for a while, but were just reissued. And I do want to mention that there are some minor changes to the UG3, UH3. Because we have MedTech and the Brain Initiative has actually signed on to Blueprint MedTech, this UG3, UH3 that's the more traditional brain one is actually only for a 1-year UG3 with a limited budget of less than $500,000 in direct costs to do regulatory and clinical trial planning activities. So no more preclinical studies. That should all be going to Blueprint MedTech. And then, of course, going on into your IDE-approved study in the second phase. In addition, we have the UH3, direct to UH3, so you get 5 years, but you have to come in by the time of award. You have to have your IDE in place before we will award the grant, so that's a little different than a previous version that we had. We no longer give you any time within the grant itself to get that IDE. We also have several funding opportunities through the HEAL initiative. I'm not going to really go into details here because you're going to have access to all this stuff. But again, the HEAL initiative is also signed on to Blueprint MedTech as well. So if you have any pain or opioid use disorder devices, those can also now come to Blueprint MedTech for support. So there's also technology development I wanted to mention within that. There's an R18 in the HEAL initiative, but that one, actually, you already have to have proof of concept, so it is different than the Brain Initiative version. So again, here are the things that we manage. Here's our team. It's grown quite a bit over the past year and a half. You can reach us at ninds-devices@nih.gov. So thank you, but before I go, I would like to point out 2 things. One, I'm a federal employee. Federal employees by law are not allowed to lobby Congress for funds. 2, the budget that was just passed did not include the money to replace the funds that the Cures Act went for the Brain Initiative. So essentially the Brain Initiative got a $280 million cut this year. So that's a large amount, more than half, I think, of the budget for the Brain Initiative. You as the community, you feel free to do what you want with that information, but I cannot advocate for funds for you. So it's important to do what you can.
So Brooks, let me know what we can do, and who we should be bugging and how we should do it.
Well, I can't tell you what to do, but I mean,
you can't do it.
I know I can write my congressperson for anything, you know,
Yeah.
on my personal behalf, but so it just seems like it was forgotten in the budget, which is a shame. So thanks.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Is my mic on? Good. Well, thank you, all you brave souls, for sticking around through the last session. I appreciate it very much. My name is Brian Schulz. I am the Scientific Program Manager for Rehabilitation Engineering and Prosthetics Orthotics in the Veterans Health Administration. And note that portfolio covers about a third of that portfolio is neural prosthetics. So I actually do have some things of relevance to this conference in my panel. So I like to start with why we're here, Lincoln's mission: to serve those who served our nation, discover knowledge, all the way from preclinical through health services research, to create innovations, advance healthcare, have that robust intramural research program that develops our clinicians and healthcare leaders to provide the lifetime of care that our veterans have earned. So our researchers are part of that healthcare system, which is the largest integrated one in the nation, with over 9 million veterans receiving care. You can read the rest of the numbers and resources listed down there, but the key point on this slide is at the bottom, that we are an intramural research program dedicated to veterans' needs, where veterans participate in research done at VA by VA investigators. Our current strategic and clinical priorities are shown here. The strategic ones have a lot of things relevant to neuromodulation, clinical trials, real-world impact, data to work. The clinical priorities also very relevant to neuromodulation, suicide prevention, pain opioid use, traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and you'll see these reflected in our RFAs and priorities throughout the rest of the presentation. So, funding eligibility. To be a principal investigator on a VA award, you need to have a 5/8 salaried appointment when funded. That doesn't mean you need to have one to apply. You can have a contingent letter of appointment from the medical center director that says, if you get this money to pay for this position, we will give you this position. So you just have to be in touch with your research office, which you really need to do for a variety of reasons anyway. That's not very challenging. You do, however, need to be a US citizen. You don't need to be a VA investigator to be a collaborator on VA research. We can collaborate with pretty much anyone on VA-funded research. Also, if you're a VA PI, you don't only need to be a VA PI. Most of our investigators have dual appointments where they are university appointed and VA appointed, and they use both of those as best they can. Our RFAs are all posted on our intranet. You'll see the link later on. Again, intramural program. All the documents to apply are submitted through the research office. There's often one person, so their deadline needs to be a lot earlier than ours to get past that bottleneck to make sure everything gets in on time. Again, need to be in contact with the VA from the start, but also the SPMs. So contact me or my equivalent to figure out what RFA is most appropriate, especially because we are in the middle of a reorganization right now. So we are much more of a moving target than usual, and I'll cover those on the next slides. But for all research, it must be relevant to veterans and conducted in VA space, so pediatrics is probably not going to work in VA. We do have partial offsite waivers. If you have expensive equipment or something at the university side, then you can apply for that. Those are usually granted. But you can't do everything at the university and just write the paper at the VA, because that's a full offsite waiver, and those are almost never granted. We do evaluate it for veteran relevance at every stage, programmatic and scientific, so that's very important. And again, contact scientific program manager. I think I have that on every slide. So I mentioned a reorganization. First, I have to tell you what we're starting from. So our initial configuration here, we have investigators, scientific review, and management, which is our overarching intramural research organization. And it's currently structured into scientific disciplines where we have basic science, benchtop lab work, animals, clinical science, where human trials. rehab, which spans from basic science all the way up to health services, but it uses functional outcomes more than medical outcomes, and health services does implementation research. And you can see here we have the same research located in all of them, only in different phases. So TBI, suicide prevention, and pain opioid use. You see the little boxes there. Because these services all have different rules and requirements and RFAs, this makes moving research from basic down the translational pathway more difficult. It also makes reporting to Congress on these very important issues more challenging because we have to ingather from all over the place in different buckets. So our solution is to reorganize with targeted clinical portfolios and partners. We are calling the portfolios that target specific clinical problems actively managed portfolios. And you can see on the bottom, we have TBI, suicide prevention, and pain opioid use. Each of those will cover all of the research in this area, all the way from basic science through implementation. There are other areas that are not as topic specific. So I come from rehab. My favorite example is prosthetics. You can lose a limb because you weren't born with it, you had it traumatically amputated, it had a vascular amputation, or even osteosarcoma. All of those people still need a prosthetic and they still need the same rehab. So that type of outcome fits into the rehab broad portfolio. That's what we're calling these. Health systems is similar. And these are just for illustrative purposes. There will be more, there are more. That is where we are going at the current point. So this reorganization will take effect on October 1st. That leaves us 2 more review cycles if you want to be able to submit something. So we have a merit award, I'll cover those on later slides, coming in the summer. The pre-applications are later this month. And the pilot awards, the Spires, will be due in August. If you submit to one of these and don't get funded, you will most likely need to reapply to the new mechanism. We want to give everyone their full resubmissions, but ERA may not allow it, so you might have to submit your response to reviewers as an attachment on a new application. We're working out details on these. But if you can't make those initial submission deadlines, you'll have to submit to our new portfolios and mechanisms. That will be announced on July 2024. So that will be the launch date for all of these new ORD-wide RFAs, pre-applications, and program announcements. General overview, those research services are going away and the actively managed portfolios will begin if they haven't already. Some are already stood up. But the scientific review groups won't change and they'll conduct review as before. My panel will still review the same topics, the same applications with the same reviewers on the same dates. They will just be getting those applications from different portfolios. But the RFAs and pre-applications will now be cross-ORD with the same rules, one clinical trial RFA to rule them. It will be, everyone uses the same thing. And the portfolios funding the research will get the pre-applications within their purview and send them to those SRGs that will not change. So, little overview, how the current application process works. We post an RFA, each service has their own version of it. Pre-application is submitted, the full application is submitted, goes to the SRG. It's scored, and the funding decision is made at the service level. So it is currently a lot more local. The new process, those ORD-wide RFAs will be posted in July again. Each portfolio will release their program announcements with their individual priorities. Those will be put together, and you will apply to a portfolio with their priorities using the ORD-wide RFAs. And that will be submitted, assigned to the SRG, which will score, and the final funding decision will end up being made at the top level at the ISRM leadership. So a lot more centrally made decisions coming in the future. So the current R&D priorities and efforts are listed here. We have these special emphasis areas. You can see a lot of the ones on the right, opioids, chronic painful conditions, the same priorities from that first slide. Translational Rehab Research Awards at the bottom right, those are fairly new. These are for inventions with VA IP behind them, so they came out of the VA system, and this is designed to provide funding for GLP testing, IND, first in human trials, early feasibility, and we will, moving forward after the reorganization, have a translational core that will be very similar to this, but instead of limiting to class 3 devices, as these are now, it'll be open to all classes of devices. Some neuromodulation fits in class 2, so we're fixing that in the new version. Our current awards, we have them all on one page. Even when these go away, we will have very similar ones coming out that will be cross-ORD. Our career development awards, 2 levels. The CDA1 is more of a postdoc award within 2 years of training, up to 2 years of up to 100% salary support and $20,000 a year in project funds. These are probably the easiest way into the VA system because it is 100% salary covered. The CDA2 is within 5 years of training, 5 years of salary support, 75 grand. That's more of a transitioning to independent investigator. Small projects in rehab research are pilot, high risk, high reward, more junior investigators, designed to provide pilot data for our merit awards, which is our kind of RO1 equivalent. This is our workhorse. About half of our studies are merit awards. The translational awards I mentioned there, they're currently the first level is a planning award. So no data collection, just getting your team together and planning for the big one, which is the level 2, up to $1 million a year for 5 years. The research career scientist is kind of like a VA tenure award. It covers your salary 100% to contribute to other projects, but it's not like tenure permanent. You have to compete for it, and people occasionally do not get it renewed. The Reeves and centers are large infrastructure awards. The centers we have most of, there's $1.3 million a year for 5 years for a large core investment to support a group of investigators in related areas. So I'll cover that on this slide. The rehab science community, everywhere in purple, has some our R&D funding, and the pins indicate those rehab centers. We have lots of them that involve neuromodulation, from Gainesville Brain Rehab Research Center, West Haven, Providence does a lot with both neuromodulation and BCI. Cleveland has 2 centers there. They do peripheral nervous system interfacing and a little bit of BCI as well. Minneapolis just got one of our 2 newest centers, but they work in more wheelchair design and O&P. I believe that VA itself has neuromodulation involved. And you might be more interested in our clinical network of care for spinal cord injuries and disorders. So it's a hub and spoke system. Again, Minneapolis is one of the hubs. And you can see the hubs in red, the spokes in blue. These are the places you would want to collaborate with if you're interested in SCI research with the VA. This is where a large body of patients are located. So I have a bunch of other slides that have links. You can see them on the website afterwards or the video. I don't need to read through these. All of our trials are on NIH Reporter and clinicaltrials.gov. You can just search for them, screening for VA. Again, links, and that's it for me. I'd be glad to take questions now or hand it off to the next person. Yep.
Okay, so first I want to apologize for not being able to attend the symposium with you all, and I want to thank the organizers for working with me so that I could provide this information regarding CDMRP's Spinal Cord Injury Research Program. So the congressionally directed medical research programs within the DoD, henceforth referred to as CDMRP, is an office within the Department of Defense, and we implement and manage funding for biomedical research programs. The funding for these programs is directed to CDMRP by Congress, meaning that the DoD does not request these funds specifically. It is Congress that adds these funds on top of the defense budget each year, and thus they focus our efforts on specific research areas. Overall, our aim at CDMRP is to transform healthcare through innovative and impactful research, and we do that through responsibly managing research that discovers, develops, and delivers healthcare solutions for service members, veterans, and the American public. And before I move on from this slide, I want to note something that is kind of special about CDMRP funding. We are able to fund impactful research regardless of where the work is being done or the citizenship of the named PI. So non-US citizens are able to be named as PIs, and institutions from around the world are able to apply for CDMRP funding opportunities. As I mentioned, our programs are dictated by Congress, and support for CDMRP doesn't just go to a centralized fund, but rather funds are fenced to specific research areas with a dedicated line item appropriation. Those funds, therefore, are only able to support research that addresses that specific research area. This is incredibly important for this audience to appreciate if you're considering applying for CDMRP funding, as the tools you are working with or developing may very likely apply to a number of injury or disease conditions. It's therefore important to communicate within your application how the research you are proposing addresses specific needs within the research area to which you are applying. For example, the Spinal Cord Injury Research Program is managing a $40 million appropriation for FY24. Those funds are meant to target research that addresses the unique issues for the SCI community. So although neuromodulation technologies may be potential interventions for generalized pain or mobility issues, because we only have a finite amount of funding, we want to ensure that we maximize the potential impact on the SCI community. And therefore, we want to support research that focuses on the specific needs of the SCI community, which may be different than other end users of the technology. So to restate this a little, for SCIRP, we are able and excited to support research on interventions with a broad end user target, but the actual research proposed should focus on the unique needs of the SCI community. The SCIRP challenges the research community to advance the development or translation of healthcare solutions for people living with SCI. We also allow for innovative research that fosters investigation into new areas of the field. However, the program favors research that is in a more advanced stage of development. This means that although SCIRP invests across the research and development continuum, as demonstrated in the bar chart on the left side of this slide, the majority of our investment focuses on research with developed interventions and healthcare solutions. So for this audience, projects like de novo device development or detailed mechanistic investigation may be too early for this program. In essence, we want to take those good ideas that were started with funding from other sources and provide follow-on funding to move those ideas and products closer to clinical implementation. Another important element of our investment strategy is that the SCIRP program funds across the continuum of care from time of injury throughout the lifespan, with a significant investment in topics relevant to chronic spinal cord injury. The program has never had a specific call for neuromodulation interventions, but as you can see from the chart on the left side of this screen, we have invested in neuromodulation technology since the beginning of the program in FY09. The entire SCIRP neuromodulation portfolio from FY09 to FY22 encompasses about 52 awards for a total investment of about $75 million. A breakdown of the stage of science, device modalities, and research outcomes is provided on the bottom half of this slide. Something else worth pointing out about this portfolio is that roughly 30% of the neuromodulation research we fund combines neuromodulation with other interventions like drugs, targeted rehab techniques, exoskeletons, and acute intermittent hypoxia therapies. This slide provides examples of funded research within the SCIRP's neuromodulation portfolio. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go over each of these projects, but I do want to point out that SCIRP invests in both invasive and non-invasive neuromodulation interventions. The program supports research addressing functional and regenerative outcomes. And finally, as I hope you can appreciate from the long list of assessments in some of these projects, the program is interested in investigating the benefits of these technologies, but also recognizes the importance of capturing SCI-specific adverse effects. The entire SCIRP portfolio can be accessed through our awards search function on the CDMRP website if you're interested in that. So for FY24, SCIRP is offering 4 funding mechanisms, which are publicly available now. Our Investigator-Initiated Research Award, Translational Research Award, the Clinical Trial Award, and our relatively new mechanism, which was initiated last year, our Clinical Translation Research Award. And as you can see, each of these mechanisms solicits research within distinct domains of the research and development spectrum. And the award information section of the program announcement for each of these mechanisms will highlight the types of research each mechanism is aiming to fund. But we use these mechanisms because they're able to build off of one another. Our IIRA is for those early stage projects, while the TRA is aiming to move an idea or product to the next stage of development. The CTRA is for clinical research and pilot clinical trials that are necessary to prepare and de-risk for future large-scale trials. And then we have the CTA, which is for those shovel-ready clinical trials that can be initiated immediately. We've structured this program to be a pipeline where projects can come in at any stage with the intent of advancing ideas and products closer to the clinic. Finally, to drive research into specific program priorities, SCRP requires that all applications to our funding opportunities address at least one of our 5 focus areas shown here. Our intention with these priority areas is to solicit research that address the major needs in the research landscape while also addressing issues of high priority to those living with SCI. Additional things to consider when applying to the SCRP is that your proposal should demonstrate a clear path to advancing products or outcomes towards clinical implementation. We're not doing science for science sake. Your proposed research must be relevant to active duty service members, veterans, their families, and the American public. And relevance to military health is a review criteria. So consider how your research is or can be uniquely relevant to that population. And finally, applications should describe the short and long-term impact of the study and how the research will lead to a practical application for individuals living with SCI. You do not need to convince us that the focus area you selected is important or has potential to impact the SCI community. We already know that. It's why it's one of our priorities. We want to know how your specific research question will have an impact on the field and those living with SCI. Something else unique to consider when applying to the SCRP is that the program requires the involvement of people with lived experience as part of the research team. And this is to provide consultation and guidance throughout the planning and execution of translational and clinical research. Our goal for this requirement is to maximize the impact and translatability of the research we fund. The entire mission of the SCRP is to develop and translate more effective strategies to improve the health and well-being of people living with spinal cord injury. And we believe that through equitable partnerships among the research and lived experience communities, we can most effectively accomplish that mission. An excellent place to learn more about SCRP is as well as the research that we fund is through our page within the CDMRP website. There you'll find helpful resources like highlights of outcomes of our funded research, our program book, which summarizes the program's history, current strategic goals, and research outcomes, as well as products that highlight our upcoming and or current funding opportunities. As noted previously, SCRP recently released the program's funding opportunities for FY24. You can find them on the eBRAP website as pictured here, but you can also find them on grants.gov as well as the CDMRP website. If you haven't subscribed to the program's mailing list to be notified when new funding opportunities are available, I strongly recommend you to do so. Signing up for our emails will put you on the list to be directly notified about upcoming funding opportunities, making you one of the first people to learn about them. You can access the sign up from either eBRAP or the CDMRP website. And once you're there, the best part is that you'll be able to select the specific programs or research areas that you're interested in, so that you'll only receive updates about topics that match your areas of interest. And with that, I will stop and we can take questions after this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the organizers for having me. At the Reeve Foundation, we have a very holistic approach, and you can see it in our motto, which is today's care and tomorrow's cure. And I'll be talking about the cure side of the organization. We've been doing quite a bit to revamp the research strategy at the Reeve Foundation. And everything that we've been doing is to accelerate research and to reduce risk for any future investment. So currently, we all know that there's no FDA-approved treatment for any SCI-associated outcome. So it begs the question, how do we get there? And I think we really need a robust clinical pipeline. And when I say robust, I mean that we need to increase the number of trials, make sure that those trials are also pivotal trials, later stage trials. We need diversity of the clinical trials. We need more than one type of approach. And we need the trials to be what I would just say smart, meaning given the high attrition rate, we need to have outcome measures and biomarkers in place so that we'll learn from these trials if they don't meet the primary and secondary endpoints. And you can see some examples of exciting trials that are happening, but also I've faded out those trials which did not meet their endpoints, and hopefully we can learn from them. So you can see the no-go trap from RENET-X, and here the neurospinal scaffold from In Vivo Therapeutics. And hopefully these are trials that in the near future we can learn from them to ensure that we can pivot and make sure that the clinical trials are going to be robust. We've been hearing a lot about electrical stimulation with Onward presenting about the transcutaneous stimulation, their ARC-EX approach. They also have their ARC-IM and the brain-spinal interface. In our revamping, we've relatively recently put together a new scientific advisory board for Reeve. Jim Guest, who you've heard speak earlier today, is the chair. And we're trying to get a lot of great ideas from different sources. And I'll mention one really great idea that we got from one of our members, Joanna Stanica, who's the CEO of Exonus. So the research vision is encapsulated with 3 pillars. Catalyze, energize, and educate. So under catalyze, we're looking for high risk, high reward initiatives. A lot of these can be very early clinical trials, and I'll speak really quickly about what we're doing in supporting bladder dysfunction and brain-spinal interface. For energize, I mean, how can we really engage industry more? And I think that's a big part of our revamping that we're doing at the Reeve Foundation, making sure that all the stakeholders that are important for us to get to therapies are working together, and industry plays a very big role. And I'll talk about an investor symposium that we're doing in San Diego later in June. And then educate, which is so crucial that we support open data sharing, that we make sure we're listening to the research community and providing research tools or research services that are going to be needed for us to get to that really robust clinical pipeline. So recently we awarded $2.6 million to the NeuroRestore lab. This is a lab that's working quite closely with Onward Medical. And it really fits under that pillar of high risk, high reward. So for the first study, which is $1.5 million, it's a small proof of concept study to see if epidural stimulation can be safe and effective for bladder dysfunction. So this really fits within our pillar of catalyze. It's high risk, yet if we get human data to show that there's safety, this can then encourage greater investment into that area of epidural stimulation with bladder control. And then we also awarded $1.1 million to NeuroRestore for a brain-spinal interface. We heard earlier today the work that they're doing for lower extremities. Here we're seeing in a small clinical trial if this can be a safe and feasible approach to be used for upper extremities. Under the Energize strategy, we've had our first annual SCI Investor Symposium. That was last year in June. We heard from 6 different companies. Some of these companies are competitors of each other, and we partnered with Lineage Cell Therapeutics to put together this meeting. And I think the meeting's unique because we're able to really listen to different programs, but still look for those commonalities in this pre-competitive space that we can be working together. So something that really came up quite a bit from the last meeting was around outcome measures and how we can be engaging with regulatory agencies to ensure that we're going to get that robust clinical pipeline. It's under this Energize pillar that we are going to be launching a request for applications that's going to be in the preclinical space. It's going to be an RFA that is really focused on that type of work that I think large pharmaceutical companies do up front. They really look up front if they're looking at drugs to look at potency, to look at selectivity, to look at the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamic relationships. And I think a lot of that is not done upfront with a lot of smaller companies. So any way that we can help support that work so that eventually at some point an investor is going to be asking for that type of data, and this can be an opportunity for us to be able to support that. We're going to be partnering with the International Spinal Research Trust in doing this program, and we're envisioning the program to be roughly in total about $2 million. And then finally, the educate pillar. We gave a grant to the University of Alberta last year to get a data retrieval specialist, someone who is physically going to be going to labs and helping them and educating them on how to format the data so that it can go into repositories like the Open Data Commons. And also for research services, and this comes back to that idea from one of our scientific advisory board members, Joanna Stanica. Wouldn't it be great if there was just more contract research organizations in the community that are providing services for a fee, where instead of reinventing the wheel and using up all of your resources in your lab or in your company, that you can go directly to a CRO. In this case, we awarded a grant to Psychogenics, so that they can develop two models. One is a T8 contusion model, and the other is a C5 hemicontusion model in rat, so that you can have a standardized approach. All the data will then be published in open access journals. And this, again, everything is to try to facilitate and accelerate research so that we can get greater investment down the line. And with that, I just want to thank all of you and be on the lookout for that RFA. Thank you.
So I guess I'm the bonus plan for you. I'm not on the agenda. So you get to hear about another funding source. So while everything's getting pulled up, we think of Christopher Reeve as Superman. Well, my job here is to make sure you leave this room knowing that there is another Superman out there. And his name is sorry, you're all set? Nope. Oh. His name was Craig Neilsen. And so I am from the Craig H. Neilsen Foundation. We are also a private funder, and we are dedicated towards spinal cord injury programs and research. So Craig Neilsen was in his early 40s. Thank you. He was in his early 40s, and he suffered a motor vehicle accident that left him with tetraplegia. And he was a real estate developer. He had lots of different buildings and things he was creating. After his injury, he turned his $27 million organization into a $500 million organization with tetraplegia. He was an amazing man. So Superman again, there's a second one in the room now. He had set up the Craig H. Neilsen Foundation, and that was run through one of his ventures, which was Ameristar Casinos. So all these second tier, maybe some of you know Cactus Pete's and different kind of casinos here. He had this umbrella casino organization and set up the Craig H. Neilsen Foundation because he realized that he was lucky. He was living with this injury, but he had resources. And he knew of people who did not have those same resources. And it was really hard for them to find transportation and support and healthcare and everything else. So he developed the foundation, and what we fund is this. We focus on research, and that's what most of you are here for. And I am one of the program officers that run the research portfolio. It's our largest funding annually in totality, but we also have a Creating Opportunities in Independence portfolio where we support a lot of smaller grassroots organizations to either increase job opportunities or create sports teams, rehabilitation, different gyms. We have another research portfolio, it's psychosocial research. So we want to look at the impact on people psychologically and their caregivers after spinal cord injury. We have the Neilsen Scholarship Program. So people who have endured a spinal cord injury, we like to support them and allow them to get an advanced level education in whatever field they want to. So we have different universities across the country that offer these. We have spinal cord injury medicine fellowships. So if you are a PM&R doctor and you want to specialize in spinal cord injury, we also support that. And we provide that through different institutions. And then finally, this is more recently, we have a visionary prize where we identify mid-level career individuals across all fields. They could be in research, it could be in community involvement, to help them really build programs in the community so that we really make a big impact. Because you're interested in research, most of you are researchers, I'm going to go a little bit further into the spinal cord injury research on the translational spectrum. And if anybody can click that, I don't think I have a thing, but, well, here we go. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this portfolio is, I don't want to say similar, because we work closely, we have strong communications with NIH, the DoD, the VA. We work with other private foundations like the Christopher and Dana Reeves Foundation, and we really try to fill a gap. So we have funding, research funding that's similar, but I don't want you to think that you can take your NIH, VA, CDMRP proposal and submit it to us. You really need to understand what we're looking for, because we don't want to compete against grants, right? We want to grow the field. And so that's good for you to know, and it's good for you to know to come and reach out to us and talk to people like me, because I will talk with you about your proposal and tell you if that's the type of research that we're looking for. And we're constantly fine-tuning this, because if we ever get into a situation where we fund the same identical grants as everybody else, then we compete against the best ones, and we don't want that. We want to grow the field. So in the spinal cord injury research portfolio, we have 3 different grant categories. We fund fellowships, so for postdocs that are looking to specialize and grow into an independent investigator in the field of spinal cord injury, we have grants for that. We have pilot research grants where you do not need preliminary data, right? We are a mechanism for you to get the data that you need to justify a larger study. And we also have senior research grants. Just because it says senior research grant, know that if you are a senior investigator established, that does not mean you apply to that one. This is where you need to call me up, because these are very specific efforts for senior investigators. And as a matter of fact, a senior investigator who has a great study in their kind of swim lane, if they come to us with a grant proposal, chances are we are not going to fund it, because that's what NIH, the VA, and CDMRP does. So talk to us about those grants. Our research funding as a whole in the foundation, we fund about $25 million minimum a year. It goes up to 40, depending on the year and what we're investing in. The SCRITS portfolio alone is, a portion of that. Obviously, it's all those 6 portfolios that add up to that dollar amount. But we do have a regular call for proposals. It's getting ready to open at the end of this month. That's the LOI period, and I encourage all of you to check us out, talk to me, talk to my colleagues, and learn about us. So, questions? Thank you.
We'll open it up. We have a little bit of time for questions.
I hope I didn't go too long.
Emily's behind you.
Hi, Hi, my name is Candace Floyd. I'm from Emory University. I'm going to speak tomorrow about this, but my question is about how one would work with the various funding agencies to develop resources. And let me give you a 2-sentence background. So I run a pig lab in spinal cord injury, and we have specialized on many outcomes and tools that we think are highly translational. And what we'd like to do is open up the use of this facility to the research community as a research resource. So we're experts in good laboratory practice. Melissa's there. We're funded by the CDMRP, by the VA, by the NIH. So we have really high standards. But my question is, how would I go about, for example, making this a med tech resource, or applying to make this a Craig Neilsen resource, or something where the community could choose what projects are done, and we would conduct those when a pig model is appropriate in a highly rigorous and robust manner.
Excellent question. I can speak for the process we follow at the Neilsen Foundation is something that you would need to speak with one of us. And, there's only 14 staff members at the Neilsen Foundation, so you would actually just set up a call with Naomi Clateman, who is our Senior Vice President of Grants and Research, and you'd discuss that. And if that's something that the Neilsen Foundation looks and understands that there is a gap that needs to be filled, that's something we will seriously consider. Again, our goal is to make sure that we are broadening the field of spinal cord injury, and so we really do look for opportunities to fill gaps that aren't addressed.
And I can speak for VA in that a lot of our medical centers don't necessarily have their own large animal facilities, and they'll contract out to the university. So just a standard contract mechanism executed at your local VA would do that well. Are you talking about like a GLP level facility?
Yes and no. Sorry, I'm loud and not loud. Could do pre-GLP or GLP, yeah, and then contracted or in a partnership with academic,
Yeah, and with those translational mechanisms, the funding for that specifically is being set out. So we're being more accommodating of that type of support.
Yeah, and I think in a similar manner to what Tracey said, I think, a conversation and trying to understand, how initiatives can really enable the entire field. I mean, that's a big part of the initiative that I mentioned with that contract research organization, Psychogenics. So in a similar manner, if there can be a way in which, there's a service that can be, provided to the entire research community, I can see that being very beneficial. So happy to talk to you more about that.
You guys will be here for the next few days, right? Or next
Tomorrow.
day, yeah.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, and from the NIH side of things, you certainly can budget for that in any of the translational projects. I did want to make a plug real quick, though, that NCMRR through NICHD, they actually reissued their Medical Rehabilitation Research Resource Center grant funding opportunity, so you should check
Brooks
that out.
will write that for you. Oh, no.
What was that? No, I'm not allowed to write it for you, though.
Okay, sorry, never mind.
Sorry.
Hi, this question is for Melissa. You did a great job of explaining how it's important to articulate military relevance associated with any application. But my question is, how important is it to have a co-investigator that is in the military, VA related, or to demonstrate that we will actually be able to recruit participants from a military background?
That's a fantastic question. So what I can tell you is that our catchment of influence is broad. So there is no requirement for you to collaborate with a VA, with an active duty service member or an MTF. However, that is always encouraged, and we state that in our program announcements that we are looking for research that is doing that. If you are not leveraging a military population or a VA population within your research, then within your military relevant statement, you're going to need to make it clear how your research is relevant or may be relevant to a military population.
Good. Let's thank our speakers one last time.